Welcome back to the channel. My name's Eric and I make custom sneakers in my spare time. Today I'm going to walk you through dyeing a pair of custom sneakers. I'll be using a pair of pink Nike Zoom Alpha Flies that I'm dyeing for a friend. Now I know what you're thinking, synthetic running shoes, dyeing them, is that even possible? Yes it is, and it's actually surprisingly super easy. We're going to transform these Alpha Flies into one-of-one eye-popping statement pieces using the power of RIT dye and boiling water. Here's the lowdown on all the tools that you need. First up, we've got the hero of the day, RIT dye for synthetics. You need to make sure it's the version for synthetics. It's super important for this to work properly. Then you're going to need to have a 10-quart bucket. Depending on the bucket you want to use, you could get a bigger or smaller bucket, but I find that working with a 10-quart bucket is just the best sizing. You're gonna need access to heat and boiling water. Next, you're definitely gonna need a pair of sneakers to dye. So pick the sneaker of your choice and the RIT dye color of your choice. You're also gonna wanna have some dish soap, and this will allow the dye to bond a little bit better to the sneaker. Finally, you're gonna need something to keep the shoes submerged. So I like filling up some Tupperware with water. You can use some weights, a brick, anything of your choice to just keep those shoes submerged. All right, so first things first, you're gonna wanna prep your sneakers. Should have another video up on my page soon about how to prep your sneakers. And without further ado, let's jump straight into it. I start the dyeing process by first submerging the shoes that I wanna dye in water for a good 10 to 15 minutes. This allows water to soak into the shoes so that when you then later dye it, the dye can seep deeply into the sneakers. Start boiling enough water to fill your pot for the dye and sneaker bath. One pro tip here is that you want to fill your bucket about 70% of the way through so that you leave enough space and volume for the sneakers to then go in without the water and dye level rising above the bucket. Finish filling your bucket with the boiling water. Got you on loop inside my head. Add some dish soap to the boiling water. This is going to allow the dye to spread evenly in the bath, which in turn will allow it to apply evenly on the sneaker. And now here's for my favorite part of dyeing sneakers, pouring the RIT synthetic dye into the dye bath. Watching this truly never gets old, and this is probably half the reason why I dye sneakers. Bask in all this glory, and like, comment, and subscribe if you're enjoying this tutorial so far. Got you on loop inside my head. Ooh, that love is all I'm thinking about. After you're done admiring the dye bath you just created, it's time to get back to work. Take a spatula and mix the dye bath to help it spread evenly. Make sure you mix extremely well here because it's pretty common for dyed sneakers to have some splotchy areas if the dye wasn't even during the mixing process. Now it's finally time to dunk the shoes. Make sure you're using some gloves here because that dye is permanent. Dunk the sneakers carefully and slowly in order to not create a splash, and make sure you have your weights ready to submerge them and hold them down. Sometimes it's a little tricky to apply the weights and get the sneakers to hold down correctly. You can definitely see me struggling a little bit in this clip, but I eventually got there. So just be patient with this and, take your time with it. It is important, and, start to realize how long you want to dye your sneakers. Depending on how long you dye your sneakers will determine the color saturation. So for this pair, I'm going from pink to red. So I didn't need to dye them for very long. I only dyed this pair for 15 minutes actually. But if you're going for a very deep color saturation, you might want to dye your sneakers for an hour. I've done that before and that's had super good results. I've also dyed a pair for as long as 12 hours because I wanted the absolute maximum color saturation out of it. So decide how deep of a color you want. It could be anywhere from 15 minutes to 12 hours. After dyeing the pair of sneakers for the period of time for your desired color saturation, take them out and thoroughly rinse the sneakers. What I like to do after rinsing the sneakers is just fill the bucket back up with just room temperature water, dump the sneakers in to let some of that dye seep out, and then you want to add some vinegar and salt into that water, mix it up a little bit, and just allow the sneakers to soak for a good 10 to 15 minutes. This is going to allow the dye to lock in. This is definitely that extra touch that I think has long-lasting effects on the dye. Here's how the shoes came out after 15 minutes of dye. Let me know how you think they came out. I'm going to go rinse them and do the vinegar bath really quick. But one more pro tip is that the beauty of the results of dyeing the sneakers are really made from your prep and then how you mix the dye in the bath so that it's spread evenly. So, using a combination of everything in this video is definitely going to get you some good results. And I think just depending on the color saturation and the amount of time you're dyeing them, you just want to time that up with the results that you're looking for. That's all for today, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Consider subscribing if you're into custom sneaker content, and I ended up turning this pair into a crazy custom. So let me know if you want a full tutorial on that.
Got you on loop inside my head. Ooh, that love is all I'm thinking.